Good morning everyone, hope you're doing well. TGIF, we've got NFP today, obviously, so you need to be careful about that. Just so you know is that we're risk on at the big picture, but the technicals have drifted lower. We were 92 yesterday and we're 80, so what I need to do is reset that now. And what it does, it measures these instruments here. And we actually had a poor day on the US. Nasdaq was up slightly, Russell 2000 down slightly, VIX was crushed, Treasury yields fell, the FTSE is up slightly, but the France 40 is down slightly. Well, actually not slightly, nearly 1%, so it's quite fairly heavy. So a little bit of a knock on the technicals, so because of that we drifted lower. So the plan is, so you know, is that we're going to get nice and low on the technical scores, and then we're going to buy the dip, pending that this sell is green, right? So we're going to wait for this to get nice and low, buy the dip, and then you're going to obviously place your stop loss, and then you're going to look to buy the dip, pending that this remains green. This tells us what the herd are doing at a big picture. Okay, that gives us an eagle-eye view about the market direction. The indices will continue to go higher as long as the herd are selling. So therefore, if they're selling, we've got a negative number, right? And QDB scores, we've implemented some fundamental checks in now, which is quite cool. And what happens, so if we've got a drop in the technical score, it gets reflected now, which is really awesome, in the QDB scores. So over here, we've got a thing called the VIX performance check, the technical difference and the sentimental difference check. And that will aid us in the scoring system. So for example, AJ is sensitive to risk on, risk off. If we're risk on, it will get a better score. Okay, so that's how it works. And we can see 8N is at the top, but it's negative, so that's slightly naughty. Pound Swiss has also got a very good score, but we're negative, so that's also naughty. So on a normal day, I'd be looking to buy whatever's up here, and you're looking for reversals. Because it's NFP, I'm just going to be really careful. And there's been a lot of chop as well, especially around the yen, which I'll talk about at the very end of the video, because we're going to make a big change on the robot. We're not going to have yen triggered anymore on the robot because it's too volatile. Okay, and that's QDB scores, and that's the spreadsheet. Let's go to IDP, and let's go to the FXCM trading station, and we'll drag that across. We'll start with S&P. So what's happened is that we're quite squeezed on the retail guys. So obviously that was the buy, you know, and we come obviously. And now what's happened is that we've basically got to like a threshold, max, like almost like max pain level, where if we exceed 20%, it's the Pareto principle. So I recommend doing a Wikipedia on a thing called the Pareto principle, and it tells us there's like there's unwritten rule about finance, and it's not just finance, it's all around the world, the 20-80 rule, and it does apply with the sentiment. So we drop below 20, it can be a bit of an omen, right? And we're getting quite close to 20, so this looks a bit squeezy. It's taken a lot of stops out in the process, and we're a little bit sideways, but I think what's probably going to happen is going to let its foot off the gas, and then we're going to start coming up a bit, which would mean if we come up a bit on here, we're probably going to fall, and our technical scores will drop, which we'll see in real time on our spreadsheet. It's updated every minute, which is really cool. So that's S&P, so it's a bit squeezy, so possibly due a little decline perhaps, but it will depend what happens here. Okay, if they might continue to sell, but if they do, there won't be anyone left. Right, so we've got to be careful. US 30, and we'll have to see what happens. Remember, this is changing all the time. I think they might sell it, but it's hard to say. We're quite sideways. If they do sell it against its moving average, then that'll be your stop loss, and then we're probably going to come up higher. But currently we haven't got the crossover yet, and they went long, so we have to draw a box. Draw a box here, and it's basically this candle, this one here. No, it's just this doji. Yeah, it's the doji. That's interesting, isn't it? So these dojis occur a lot at the crossovers. So when there's market uncertainty about price, it can tend to sway the herd sentiment. See, there's a doji there, and we had the change on the sentiment. So got to watch out for these dojis. There are doji indicators for MetaTrader 4 which you can download, and they'll highlight the doji for you. So there's one here, for example. You know, you're just looking for a thin, a very small body but a long wick. So here we go. Pretty much there's a crossover doji, and that's how you can spot them. So if you haven't got access to the indicator, when you have a doji, you can see a reaction in sentiment. Okay, so that's the US 30. So they might sell it, but if they do, then we'll come up and we'll have some resistance there. So that's that. DAX quickly. It was very erratic, chopping, very serrated like a knife. Very horrible sentiment there. It's getting a little bit more smoother. This bit was horrendous to trade, and they've gone long, so we can create a box. Okay. And we'll finish up with gold, and then we'll look at the robot, and we're going to remove yen on Monday because it happened so much is that it paid the herd quite a bit this week, and we don't want that. We don't want the herd to be paid. If we're going to do the opposite of the herd, we're going to encounter losses, right? So they just happen to get paid quite a bit on yen, but we are quite extreme, and also it's fundamentally risky as well because you've got the BOJ interventions and things. So they've gone long, so this is therefore a supply or resistance, and so they might continue to go long. And it looks like they are, aren't they? And lastly, gold, if it loads, come on. Oh, God, so slow. Gold, where are we? And then did that work? Yes, it did. Cool, that was slow. Well, so they went long here, so we got a doji. Yeah, pretty much. We can map that doji, and so we might come up to test it. We are looking like we're going to possibly come up to test it now, and we shouldn't be above 1947 because that's where they started going long. Okay, so this is going to probably be tested and today, but I wouldn't trade it today because we've got NFP. And there's just going to be whales and sharks and wolves out, and they can do a bit of destruction as well. So you know, they've gone long, so we fell, but we really shouldn't be above 1947 because that would mean that these guys who went long will get paid. So this is them undergoing drawdown. If we go above here, it'll mean that they get paid, and that'll be unusual, but it can happen, and it's NFP. Remember to keep an eye on the US Treasury yields. And if they're pumping, then this will fall. If the US Treasury yields are dumping, then this is going to pump. All right, so there's like an inverse correlation. Now, yen is being very tricky and quite frustrating. So we've had quite a bit of a loss this week on our robot. A lot to do with the yen, to be honest with you. And yeah, that's it. So what we'll have to do is just remove the yen. Although admittedly it's doing well this week, has been very painful for us because the herd have been paid the yen on their yen position, and so we can't afford that. We can't afford that to happen. We can't have anything risky in our setup where the yen is clearly a risk for our profit and loss. And that's it. So maybe these are going to go well, but if we look at the history, then we can see over like the last 3 days, I'll show you, and we see a lot of losses on the yen. Last 3 days. So these losses here, there's one on the pound Swiss admittedly, so EJ £5 loss, and yeah, it's not so good, quite very poor actually. So we need to address these, get rid of these yen. Okay, admittedly that was profitable, and so there's a loss on yen as well. So it did pay the herd quite a bit. So if we remove the yen, then we'll mitigate some risk out of the equation. And the pound was also a bit weird because we had the CPI from the Eurozone as well. So that really shifted the sentiment. So we'll have to see how we go. And if next week is a negative week, we're going to have to totally revise the whole strategy. And I think we might probably do a technical look with the sentiment, because we're just purely looking at sentiment. I think maybe we need to look more at technicals, but we can't have a loss like this. It's just not acceptable. Remember, if you want to test it, you will have to use a demo account. Don't go live because we're still ironing out the the chinks in the armour. We want to make sure it's all smooth before we go live. But this week has been quite tricky with JPY, as you can see. And maybe today these ones will go okay, but we're not going to negate that loss that we've incurred this week. So removing that should help next week, but we'll have to wait and see. Remember to trade safely, and I'm around if you need me, and just let me know if you need any help. I won't mind at all. So let's see how we go. Have a good day, and I'll speak to you guys soon.